Knon 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to knon.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.
What a game! What a game!
Schutze here with Get Off My Lawn. Good to be back. My thanks to the Workers Beat for helping me out last week. We're coming back to you this week with a conversation about the upcoming city council races close upon us. I have here a distinguished guest, Jeff Siegel, who's rejoining me. Jeff's one of the city's more astute observers of local politics, and we're going to talk about the city council races. I want to remind you that this is our pledge drive. We need your help to stay here and keep the plywood out of the windows. Give us a call. I was exaggerating. You know I didn't really mean. There's not going to be any plywood in the windows. It's not that dire. This is a healthy enterprise, and I remind you again, the city's best music station and the city's most diverse talk station. Call us up at 972-647-1893. Give us some help, whatever you can do. 972-647-1893. We have a special offer this week for anyone who contributes over $100,000. I will come live with you for a year. So keep that in mind. $100,000, and I'll come live at your house for a year.
Were you going to bring the dogs?
Yeah. Or $200,000, and I won't come live with you. So either way, 972-647-1893. Jeff, welcome back.
It's always a pleasure, Jim, if only because when I come here, people actually say nice things to me.
Oh, really? Yeah. You mean the callers?
No, that was a wonderful introduction. I'm very flattered.
Oh, okay. Before we get into politics, remind people some of your background. Talk to us about the wine.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's the other thing, is you let me plug all my stuff.
Yeah.
I write a monthly column for Advocate magazines in Dallas, focusing on city and politics and so forth. I contribute to our blog at advocatemagazine.com. And then in my spare time, I write a wine blog called The Wine Curmudgeon, in which I try to demystify wine for people so that we can drink it just like everybody else does. You don't have to worry about being rich.
But why do you have to be a curmudgeon about it? I mean,
because
it's wine.
The wine business is very top-down, and there's a lot of people in charge. This is a good subject for KNON, I guess. There's a lot of people in charge who want to tell you what you should drink, and you have to like the certain things that they like, and you're not allowed to drink what you want. So I'm there. Do whatever you want.
So you're curmudgeonly toward the oligarchs at the top of the. You're not curmudgeonly toward the drinkers.
No, my message to the drinkers is drink whatever you like, and if you don't like it, who cares?
Yeah, that was always my message to myself for a good many years. Let's talk about this upcoming council race. Do you have any particular districts that you've been looking at, especially?
Well, I think there are three that are most interesting, which is the one in Oak Cliff between Scott Griggs and Delia Jasso, right, which strikes me as an attempt to get Scott Griggs off the city council. Of course, then in the M Streets in East Dallas, who's going to replace Angela Hunt.
Right.
And then the one that's perhaps the most interesting, and I'm not quite sure why, because they seem to be so exactly alike, and I may be mistaken about this.
Right.
But in Preston Hollow, between Leland Burke and Jennifer Staubach Gates.
Yeah, Jennifer Staubach beat Gates. And that's she is who she is. She's got a famous name. It's not her fault. She also, according to the Rudy Bush this morning, has incredible tons of money. What is it? It's like $500,000.
The amazing thing about that race in particular is that, considering it's the Dallas City Council and considering most people don't care and considering that no one votes, right. In Preston Hollow in particular, they spend exorbitant sums of money to get on the council, and I've never been able to figure out why that is.
Yeah, and it certainly comes down to very fine points that would be pretty arcane to the average citizen, but there's a reason why that money is spent, and I think it typically comes down to development deals and soccer lights.
It's real funny. I sent an email to one of the editors at The Advocate the other day, and I said, are we ever going to be done with this soccer lights thing?
Yeah.
It seems to be going on longer than
right.
Political races.
Yeah. I got a call. There was an earlier soccer lights controversy. I'm thinking it was at Hockaday. And, people kind of profile me a little bit. So I got a call, this is years back, from somebody who was saying, Jim, you've got to stand up for the people. Said the elite around in the neighborhood around Hockaday is, I don't know if the elite was pro-soccer lights or anti, but they were acting elitist about it. And the caller said that it was they were trampling all over the rights of the people. And I listened, and then I said, look, there are no people in that neighborhood. Everybody's elite. This is like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin for me. It's a distinction that's hard to make. Staubach Gates comes in with a big name. Do you think that she's any... It's almost not a question of is she in the hand of the developers or is Burke? It's which developers is which one of them in the hand of.
And I don't know that we'll know the answer to that until we actually maybe see who gets elected and what happens. Burke has been endorsed by the current council member, by the legendary, your old pal, Mitch Rosansky.
Yeah.
And they're, it's not like you've actually seen either of them vote a certain way because they got a campaign contribution.
Right.
It's a whole lot more subtle than that.
Yeah. And Mitchell, the former council member in that district, 2 terms ago, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody I liked and admired for his independence. He had a flair for winding up in positions of irrelevance on a lot of issues. That makes it a tough one for me to parse. I want to break back in for a second and remind listeners that this is the week of our pledge drive, and we sincerely need your participation, your commitment in order to stay here and do what we do. We're at 972-647-1893. If you can call up and do and make a contribution, it's hugely appreciated by us, but you're also, I think, making a real difference in the city by keeping KNON on the air and making sure that Dallas has an alternative voice on the radio waves. 972-647-1893. I'm sitting here with Jeff Siegel of the Advocate newspapers, a longtime political observer. So we talked about the Staubach Gates race a little bit. And you mentioned, Jeff, that you thought that the one in North Oak Cliff looked like an effort to get rid of Scott Griggs.
I think the interesting thing about what we're seeing in this election in particular, and I know you've written a little bit about this, is that this is an opportunity for the people downtown who want certain things and are tired of people who actually haven't been able to stop them from getting what they want, but to get rid of the flies that are buzzing around their heads. And Scott Griggs has been outspoken in support of neighborhood issues, and he's been against the toll road. Is there an official term? Like, is it always the stupid toll road? Is
well, sometimes called the stupid underwater toll road.
Underwater toll road, that's it. And he's generally voted with the 2 or 3 sensible members of the council, and it just seemed weird to me. And I'm not a conspiracy guy by any way, shape of the imagination. It just seemed weird to me that in this entire redistricting process, he's the only one that got redistricted.
And unlike you, I am a conspiracy guy by every way, shape, and form. And I can't help noticing that you had this really for the first time in 300 years that I've been covering city council, you had this little center of gravity on the council, which is Griggs, Hunt, Grayson. And no, they weren't able to, 3 votes out of 15, they weren't able to swing things their way on key votes, but they're all 3 really smart. And they were able to bring to bear a lot of information that just wouldn't have been on the table. The transportation planning is an area where Grayson is especially smart, and so are the other 2. And they were able to kind of call the establishment on some of its agenda and some of these things, and bring, for example, they told us that we had to have the toll road, we had to build this new freeway as a detour so they could fix the Mixmaster, the old exchanges. Then when they didn't have enough money to do both, and it looked like fixing, so they couldn't do both, so it looked like, well, don't do the toll road, fix the Mixmaster. That's what we got, and that's where the big bang for the buck is in terms of reducing traffic congestion. And then the toll road proponents came back and said, actually, no, we should forget about the Mixmaster. Just ditch all that and just build the toll road, because it's the bang for the buck. And Grayson, Hunt, and Griggs were able to come back in and demonstrate that this stuff just wasn't true, that their numbers they were faking up the numbers. And I think it's been an enormous sharp stick in the eye for the Citizens Council group to have those 3 on the council saying stuff that the Citizens Council doesn't want to have said publicly. And so they would love to get rid of all 3 of them. Grayson is unopposed, so they can't get rid of her. She's interesting, she's North Dallas. She's pretty conservative on a lot of stuff, but she has a sort of, I think of it as an old school Republican, civic-minded League of Women Voters take on stuff, which has a lot of independence in it. I mean, there's nothing especially Republican about the toll road. It's just what some guys want.
And Sandy's also very polite.
Yes.
And I think that's another one of her assets.
Another one of her assets, another reason to get rid of her, because they can't jump her for being a B word, which is the one that comes up whenever you have an independent woman on the council.
No, really? You think that went around in discussion of Angela Hunt?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, and we'll come to that. We're in a little bit. We're going to be ready for our first break. So let's save Angela for the second session. And we were talking about Griggs and
Delia Jasso.
Well, or Hasso.
Okay.
As I say, I'm sorry, but I just got to go with. I got to be politically correct about this. As long as it's not my name, don't ever ask me how my name is correctly pronounced, because I have no idea. Knowledge was lost a couple generations ago in the family. But they were pitted against each other. Do you have a gut sense of who's going to win that one? Or?
Well, I don't have a gut sense for a couple of different reasons. One of which is I don't know how many people are going to turn out to vote.
Yeah.
If you get 300 people voting, which is,
right.
I think, going to be the turnout in some of the contested districts south of the Trinity.
Isn't that amazing?
And they're the people who are really getting screwed, the ones who aren't voting.
Yeah.
If you get a big turnout, I would think Griggs would have a better chance. Having said that, yeah, I mean, you and I have been both watching elections a long time and trying to figure out what Dallas voters are going to do.
Right.
It's just impossible.
And as you say, when the turnout is so small, it depends on things like what's on TV that day. You know, the weather.
Well, it's an early voting. Am I going to be driving past the early voting place and I'll stop in and vote?
Right. Early voting, the great, the dark secret of these Dallas city council elections, because the turnout's so small and because there's so many ways to manipulate the early vote. I'm not against early voting. You know, people should vote whenever and however they can, but it's such a dicey system in terms of the ability of people to play with it.
It's so easy to get people out for early voting who would normally vote by approaching them in a certain way.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I can speak openly about the late, great Tony Garrett because he's no longer with us. The dear departed are what we call libel-proof.
That's exactly right.
But he used to give me chapter and verse on early vote. One election he told me about, he went out and he rounded up all of these old people and put them on buses and voted them. And I forget why. The winds changed. They needed to do something else, or somebody changed sides. And so he went back to all the same people and had them sign affidavits to the fact that they had been falsely dragooned into voting. They were contesting their own votes, which he had gotten them to do. So, excuse me. It's a very sticky wicket sometimes.
And the other thing about early voting is that you rarely see people younger than me voting. And once again, as you say, people should vote. How we get people to the polls, that's not the problem. But it makes it easier for people who have lots of time to vote anyway.
Yeah. And the other side of it is, in the old days, and I think there's still whispers of this, it was always the sort of North Dallas establishment that was opposed to all early vote, any kind. They were opposed to any voting that helped people in South Dallas vote.
Right.
So there's that nasty flavor from the past. I think we're going to go take our break, and we'll be back to see you in a minute. This is the very sad music, Jeff. That means I'm leaving for a minute.
But you will be back.
Yeah.
KNON depends on listener support to stay on the air, and now is the time for you to help keep this show on the air. If you like what you're hearing and want to show your appreciation for great community radio, pick up the phone and call to make a pledge. Call 972-647-1893 or go online to knon.org. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Without the support of our listeners, there won't be any community radio on the air in North Texas. So take a few minutes to make a pledge. Call 972-647-1893 or go online to knon.org.
When they're gone for good. This is Scott from KNON's Texas Blues Radio telling you don't miss out on some great blues. KNON's Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 Blues CD. It's a CD put together by real blues fans for real blues fans like you. Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 features great local blues from Michael J. and the Paul Bird Band, JJ and the Detonators, the Chris Watson Band, the Two Tones, Rough Cut Blues Band, Jeff Stone with Charlie Love, Dave Millsap, Sirloin and the Ass Kicking Machine, Tutu Jones, Blues Boy Bo, Buddy Whittington, Andrea Dawson, Kirkland James, Sonny Colley, and Johnny Red and the Roosters. Get a copy now at Forever Young Records in Grand Prairie, Recordtown in Fort Worth, and in Dallas at Bill's Records. This is a Dallas Blues collector's item. A very limited amount of vinyl copies can be found at Forever Young Records, the sponsor of this great blues project. CD downloads are available at cdbaby.com. Whether you get it as a download, on vinyl, or on CD, all the proceeds will benefit KNON. For more info on Texas Blues Radio Volume 5, visit knon.org.
Jim Schutze back with Get Off My Lawn. Want to remind you, before we get going back on city council races, that this is our pledge week, our pledge drive. Call at 972-647-1893 if you can help us. 972-647-1893. You make a big difference if you can give us some support. You help keep the city's best radio station on the air. Jeff, we're talking about city council races, and during the break we were talking about yard signs. Tell me again your theory about how that works.
My theory about yard signs is not who has the most yard signs.
Mm-hmm.
My theory is in an area, in a neighborhood where there should be yard signs for a certain candidate,
mm-hmm.
if those yard signs aren't there, I think that's really significant. When Ron Natinsky ran for mayor the last time, and there was some talk that he was a real serious candidate and he had some money behind him. I actually spent a lot of time driving around North Dallas, north of LBJ, which, as you know, that's like going to Oklahoma. And what struck me, I spent a Sunday afternoon doing that, and there were no Ron Natinsky yard signs out at night. And he didn't. Sure enough, he didn't even make the runoff.
Do you think it's because? He could afford yard signs. Do you think it's because they called people up and they said, "No, I don't want one in my yard"?
What I think yard signs are a function of enthusiasm for a candidate,
mm-hmm.
and so a lack of yard signs means lack of enthusiasm.
Right. And in District 14, where we live, Angela Hunt's.
Well, actually, I'm in Sheffy's district.
Oh.
I'm just on the other side since I moved.
So I didn't realize that you'd left the people. You're So.
That's a very long story.
Okay. It's all right. It's a free country. Do you ever look back? Do you ever speak to any of the old people you lived with back in the old neighborhood?
Yeah, I always stop you on the street when I see you.
Oh, okay. All right. Leaving District 14. That sounds like a band name or something. In what do you figure is going on in District 14? We were talking about yard signs, for example. In my neighborhood, we don't put yard signs up in our yard because we're newspaper people,
right.
but everybody else has a yard sign. And the yard signs trend one way or the other. Now, on our street, they're all Jim Rogers. But if you put up a Michael Kingston or an Abtahi yard sign, all the other neighbors show up like in front of your house. Say, what's that about?
I think the reason for that is if you go back and look at voting numbers and you look at how District 14 is voted and you look at what Angela Hunt did in her time on the council to reinforce that idea that people who live in that part of East Dallas, and to be fair, even in some parts of Lakewood and some parts of Lake Highlands, mm-hmm. And certainly in Oak Lawn, that the people who live there, people such as yourself, actually believe that they should have a voice in how the city is run, and it shouldn't all be about rubber stamping, and it shouldn't all be about underwater toll roads.
Right. And that's a tradition that goes back. We have a caller here, Marshall. Are you doing the $100,000 pledge? Hello, Marshall.
No, I was doing the $10 million pledge. The
$10 million pledge. Okay, that means I will actually be interred next to you. So you own me. What's up today, Marshall?
Well, I'm actually upping my membership. I guess about 3 months ago I pledged, and I'm doing it again.
Oh, great!
Your show.
Thank you so much. That sincerely really does mean a lot to us, Marshall. Thank you.
Well, good. I used to live in Oak Cliff back in the 70s, and back then it was open knowledge that we would help pass a bond issue. Say, I remember for Davis Street, and especially.
Right.
That thing passed about 2 or 3 times, but the money never went to White and Davis. It always went up to North Dallas, especially for the developers. And
right.
And I never understood, because the people down there at that time, there were a lot of folks who were retirees,
Right.
who lived in North Oak Cliff,
Mm-hmm.
and some of these people used to tell me, well, we never wanted to be part of Dallas, and they remembered Oak Cliff back when it was its own little city.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why people put up with that. But anyway, there's a question I'd like to ask, and then
Sure.
I'll let you go. The Tony Garrett that you mentioned,
Yes.
is that the Tony Garrett who used to work for KERA?
Yeah, absolutely. Tony was on Newsroom, and then he went on to become a political consultant. He worked for, I'm thinking, Bill Hobby in Austin. He had a couple big jobs, both as spokesperson and consultant, and then came back to Dallas and did a lot of political consulting for people. And Tony really knew he not only knew where the bones were buried, he'd buried a lot of them. And so he was a great source. And for me, because he was a former journalist himself, he would call me up with a story. He'd provide me with all the documents, all the phone numbers I needed to call, and a tentative lead. He was a great resource. I have to tell you, Marshall, you mentioned that separatist mentality in Oak Cliff. My wife is a product of Oak Cliff and of that mentality. And long ago, when we were first married and we bought our first house in East Dallas, and I was a Yankee carpetbagger. I didn't know what was what. My father-in-law said, when we told him we bought this house in East Dallas, he said, "So, you're going to live in Dallas?" And I thought, yeah? What's he talking about? And then my wife had to tell me later, no, he meant not Oak Cliff, which is interesting. The more substantive thing you mentioned was that tendency for the old leadership in Oak Cliff to always go along with the Citizens Council North Dallas crowd and never get anything out of it. I mean, and Marshall, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for calling. But
expand upon that, because I think there are a lot of these young people now in Oak Cliff that are really making a go of it, and I really love to see that.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping there are folks down there who become more class conscious. In other words, realizing they're paying in, but they're not getting anything.
Well, the interesting thing about Griggs to me is that, Griggs is a young guy, and so obviously his social views are more tolerant and a little more Cosmo than you would expect in an old guy. But I don't see him as especially to you, Jeff, as a big liberal crusader at all. He's a guy who's pro-development. It's just pro-North Oak Cliff development.
One of the amazing things about what's happened in North Oak Cliff and Bishop Arts and so forth, and as an East Dallas guy, I've always gotten a kick out of this, is that they did it without any help from the city.
Yeah, and maybe in spite of the city.
Well, that's not completely true, because I remember back in the 70s when they got the old Oak Cliff Historic District in.
Right.
And they expanded it after that. It was back in the mid-'70s when they put that in, and then that people came in and they redid all those houses.
Right.
They improved them.
Well, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but my point is, if you look to how the city will help some neighborhoods, if you look at TIFs, if you look at some of the tax districts, if you look at a lot of what's gone on uptown and over toward Oak Lawn, no one at City Hall would have ever thought that Oak Cliff was worthy of that.
I got you. Yeah, you're right. You're exactly
and it is.
Right.
It's all about worldview. It took me a long time to snap to that. Way long ago, when Robert Dedman of Dallas was head of the state Highway Commission, and they wanted to double-deck Central. And he didn't believe that anybody was living in the M Streets. He didn't think it was a neighborhood. He just thought it should be like used car lots. So the people in the M Streets did this weird thing where they had pictures taken of themselves standing in front of their houses, like, here we are. And they sent the thing to Dedman. Later, I had this conversation with Dedman, and toward the end of it, I said, did you ever get that notebook full of pictures of people in front of their houses? And he said, he went off on it. He said, "Oh, I did. It's still on my desk. It's fascinating." And I said, "What's fascinating about it?" And he said, "Well, those all looked like such nice young people. They could have been friends of my daughter, and I don't understand why nice young people from good families like that would want to live in used houses." And it was a worldview thing. It just wasn't part of his universe.
Yeah, well, they had, I remember that because they had, when I say they, I mean the business and bankers had filed plans with the state. They were going to buy out, they were going to use their zoning authority and basically buy out and commercialize all those M streets, and they faced rebellion.
Absolutely.
But, when one more thing, and then I'll hang up. But back in the mid-'70s, my late wife and I owned a newsstand in Oak Cliff.
Huh.
And we tried to sell Town and Country magazine there.
Right.
And our distributor told us that they would not give us any copies because the person in charge of Town and Country magazine did not think that the people in Oak Cliff should have any issues. They wanted all those copies sold in North Dallas.
Yes.
And that's the way they looked at Oak Cliff. We were just
right. There's a huge
we were a tax base to be plundered.
Right.
For the benefit of North Dallas.
And that was an enormous mentality, and Hunt and Griggs represent a huge turnaround in that, and we've all seen it in our neighborhoods. In my neighborhood, we had a Texaco station that sold cheap wine to homeless people, and this Palestinian family came in and bought it, and upscaled the whole thing and turned it into a actual wine store and so on, and really cleaned it up and made it a great little place. And for a while, Texaco wouldn't support them because they said, our demographic studies show that your profile of business doesn't belong where you are. You need to get back to that cheap wine. And the thing became hugely successful, and then Texaco wanted back in. But it's true that we're all victims of that kind of sort of profiling, and it's taken a lot of smarts and guts and courage on our part of council leadership to fight that. And you look at the successes of North Oak Cliff, you look at the successes of East Dallas. In that sense, those things did happen in spite of and against the resistance of City Hall and at the cost of huge battles. Marshall, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the sad part to me is I think we're still seeing it, not as much from City Hall. I think we've beaten City Hall down in some respects, but I think we're still seeing it from the development community. The whatever they want to do at Gaston, Garland, and Grand, in which we're going to get a strip shopping center, and someone's asked the question, well, what's so bad with the strip shopping center? If you look what's being with the same developer, Lincoln Property is doing over in Oak Lawn at Turtle Creek across the street from the Catholic Church,
right? They're
getting an upscale grocery store.
Yeah,
they're getting a very fancy redevelopment on that shopping center, and we're going to end up probably, with some Chick-fil-A's and a Starbucks.
There's something about the way those corporations do their demographics. They must, I don't get how it works. They take too big a pie. But the other example here is Whole Foods on Gaston and Abrams. That was a store where two previous big companies came in and said, we need a cheap grocery store with bad air conditioning and melting ice cream here. And
I miss my Minions.
Didn't make it. And so Whole Foods comes in and sort of this huge, I'm kind of mad at the store because it's so expensive. And I try not to go if I can help it, but you have to for some stuff. But they came in and this big upscale market rush to them from the environs. But in those environs, you also have working people, working class people. You have non-white people. That all the stuff that we sort of like about East Dallas, the fact that it's diverse and not boring, but somehow that pushes the wrong buttons on the corporate demographic studies.
And you were talking before, when you were talking about Dedman and having such a small world perspective. The other thing I think is incredibly fascinating about this is somebody like Lincoln, which is nationally known for being smart, still sees Dallas in an old-fashioned way.
Yes.
And yet, Trader Joe's, which is like the ultimate smart, savvy company, sees that part of East Dallas in exactly the opposite way. The high money guys who are going to redevelop Henderson see that part of East Dallas in a completely different way. So in one respect, we're still fighting the guys here who and because I say guys because for the most part they still are old white guys.
Yeah. I where the business of being an old white guy is concerned, I guess I live in a glass house, so I want to be careful what I say. But I know a little teeny bit about Lincoln Properties, and they are old white guys, and they are local, and they do have this worldview that's just that's anachronistic, but they don't know they have that worldview. We're going to come up in our final session of this show with Jeff Siegel, talking about city council races, and we're going to get more into District 14, and in particular the top three candidates, who would be Jim Rogers and Bobby Abtahi and Philip Kingston. That's a very interesting race for all these themes we're talking about. Not that Griggs Hasso Jasso isn't, but in District 14, these things come to a particular point. Before we leave here for the break, I want to remind listeners that this is our pledge drive. We're at 972-647-1893. Marshall's already gotten things going with a generous pledge, and I hope somebody else will call in and give us a little boost, give us some money, 972-647-1893. Jim Schutze with Get Off My Lawn. We're going to go to the break, and then we'll be back with Jeff Siegel and more about the upcoming council races, and especially District 14.
KNON would like to thank you for supporting community radio. Your donations continue to keep the voice of the people on the air. Did you know that many companies offer a matching donation when you make a pledge to KNON? Ask your company if they have a matching program. When your employer matches your pledge, KNON reaches its goal twice as fast, bringing you more of the music you love.
This is William, your videographer for the KNON talk shows. You can watch Get Off My Lawn by going to the KNON.org website. Click on schedules and choose Get Off My Lawn's page. Scroll to the bottom and choose your favorite show to watch. This show will be ready for viewing by Tuesday lunchtime. Have a great day.
Get off my lawn.
Hey, babes, take one.
Jim Schutze back with Get Off My Lawn. In the middle of pledge drive. Call us up at 972-647-1893. Make a pledge. Help keep the city's best radio station on the air. Your help here, your contributions are really significant and meaningful, and I hope you'll call us up and take part. 972-647-1893. I'm sitting here with Jeff Siegel of the Advocate newspapers and one of the city's more astute political observers, and we're talking about the upcoming city council races. We've drawn down on District 14 some for this last session. And there we have an interesting race. We have Philip Kingston, who's been endorsed by Angela Hunt, the incumbent. We have Jim Rogers, who for some weird reason, when the News did their endorsements, they shoved Rogers back in the pack with the also-rans, and I don't think that's true at all. Rogers has a long history in the district, and he's very respected. He's raising money up there in the neighborhood with the others. He's certainly head on yard signs in my part of East Dallas, so I consider him a contender. Probably you'd have to say that Kingston should be the favorite with Angela Hunt's endorsement.
Again, it'll come down to turnout, number one, and I think it will also come down to, I don't want to say that this is a battle for the soul of District 14, because that's being too melodramatic, and because there are good people who disagree in District 14, and that doesn't make them bad people.
Right.
But there's being more money spent than I was surprised to see, and when that money's coming from people who want to see that money's coming from outside the district, I think, from people who want to see a certain result.
You know, the thing about Kingston, for example, is that these people, when they went before the Citizens Council, which is where you get the money, they were grilled about the toll road. Are you for the toll road or are you against the toll road? Kingston's always been very direct about it, that he's against it. And he's willing to give a few points. You know, he's not what you'd call strident. He says, look, this thing's already decided, and I'm not going to stop. There's not going to be a chance for me to stop it, but if I had a chance, I would. I think that honesty has drawn a big target on him. For the Citizens Council people, they don't want somebody in there who's going to carry on that spirit of independence that Hunt represents. Bobby Abtahi is the gray horse in this thing, who sort of comes in through a funny back door. Abtahi was appointed to the Plan Commission by a Southern Dallas representative. He doesn't live in his district, Dwayne Caraway's district. It's sort of weird that Caraway appointed him. While on the Plan Commission, Abtahi has a solid anti-neighborhood history. April 19th of last year, he voted there was a big battle over a Lakewood Special Purpose District, and the neighborhood advocates, Joanna Hampton, Renee Schmidt, Gay Hopkins, all wanted this thing turned down with prejudice, which means that it makes it go away forever. And Abtahi voted the way the neighborhood didn't want, which was a denial without prejudice. July 19, he voted for an extended SUP for a late night permit, even though the Plan Commissioner from that district where the permit was, Liz Wally, was asking, please don't support the thing. So he voted against the neighborhood on that. August 2, he voted for a replat in Greenway Parks that was objected to by a lot of people over there, Molly Van Ort and Neil Emmons, Virginia McAllister. At a September 20th meeting, he voted for approval of a multifamily district over the objections of the neighborhood residents and over, again, Liz Wally, the Plan Commissioner from the area. Also at that meeting, he voted for a PD in Uptown, again, over the neighborhood's objections. So he has this anti-neighborhood history, but he has a huge amount of money.
I think I have a conspiracy theory.
Okay, all right.
I think we've been talking long enough. I think I've come up with a conspiracy theory. Earlier this week, a couple of weeks ago, when the Morning News ran that bizarre article about the best place for urban living in the Dallas area was in Irving.
Yeah, right.
And I think
Right.
Here's what's going on here. And I've seen enough downtown in the city manager's office and so forth that I think there might actually be some truth to this. The next big trend is urban living, urban infill, younger people moving back into the city. All right. So Dallas does not look like Manhattan.
Right.
Dallas does not look like Chicago. Dallas does not look like Philadelphia or Boston. So what we're going to do is, if we're going to be hip and with it for all this urban infill and getting young people, we're going to have to rezone everything so we can look like Chicago and Manhattan and so forth. And I think maybe that's what there's nothing in these parts of town, Jim. There's nothing left to develop.
Right, and the scary thing is what we were talking about in the last section is, I mean, you don't have to be against redevelopment, but what kind of redevelopment? What if you're going to get the guys we were talking about, sort of the Lincoln Properties mentality, and they only know how to, I mean, they have this mentality about it, and they look at East Dallas and they say, redevelopment, okay, great big cheap apartment buildings and strip shopping centers.
Yep.
Because they look at their demographics and they say that's all that will work there. You look at instance after instance in the map, and it's not all that will work. I mean, not in East Dallas, but in North Oak Cliff at Bishop Arch, you see an entirely different kind of very, very successful development. I guess it's not on the scale that the big guys want.
I'm just convinced that they have this vision of Dallas, this very 70s, 80s, 90s vision of Dallas, and this is the 21st century. And in the 21st century, you can have an urban city, you can have a livable city with single-family homes. You can have Seattle, you can have Portland.
You can have something that you don't necessarily see anywhere else. Is it okay for us to be for Dallas to be a little unique? And I think you're right. They just don't get that. We've got Tony on line 3. Tony, hang on for 1 second. I want to make one more Abtahi point. I had a conversation with him early on, and my first question was, look, just what's your position on the toll road? And he said, well, why do we have to talk about the toll road? That's not even in the district. And I said, what's your position on the toll road? Just let me know. Just tell me. I think that his answer could have been, well, I'm for it. Because there might be a lot of people in District 14 who think, well, it isn't my most important issue. It's not in my district. And let me hear the rest of what the guy has to say. But instead of saying he's for it, Abtahi says, well, I think that question is too divisive, and so I'm not going to answer it. And in this conversation, I said, okay, so you're for it. And come on, this is District 14. You can't say that to us. So if you're in District 14, I think is sort of politically sophisticated and tolerant enough that the guy could have been for the toll road and maybe sold it with other positions. But you can't weasel out of the question, because that brings up, then we think, okay, you are a Manchurian candidate for the mafia. You are. The only reason you would weasel is because you're for it and you don't want to admit it. Let me go to Tony on line 3. Tony, are you still with us?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah. How are you?
Okay, yes, I'm all right. I want to ask a question.
Sure.
My son goes to school in Norfolk Cliff.
He goes to school where?
At Kessler School in Norfolk Cliff.
Yes.
I just think it's Oak Cliff, but anyway, why is the development on? I understand why the development on that side, because it's close to downtown. It's got the Kessler, you got Stephen Park, but what is it that the other council members that have Oak Cliff, what are they doing wrong, whereas they cannot get that same kind of development? They always argue, when they run for office, I'm here for development, and when you go around Dallas, Oak Cliff, you don't see that same kind of development you have in Oak Cliff.
Yeah.
Now, I've ridden dark rail from Pleasant Grove to all the way to Plano.
Right.
And for some strange reason, the same development is not happening to the dark rail. And I bring that back to East Dallas.
Yeah.
Maybe if East Dallas had a rail going straight through it, maybe it might have a different kind of development.
Sure.
Off the air.
Well, the bias that we've been talking about here, the anti-East Dallas, anti-Oak Cliff bias, is a bunch of white people arguing about which kind of white person is more picked on, which is, of course, absurd when you look at the magnitude of real racial bias in the way this works and the way it redounds against Southern Dallas, African American and Hispanic neighborhoods. Whatever white people in East Dallas and North Oak Cliff have to put up with from the old mentality. It's peanuts next to what minority neighborhoods put up with. The encouraging thing is that in spite of that, there's been substantial development in southern Dallas. It tends to be way south, along 20, closer to the southern suburbs. So things are changing, but not fast enough.
The one piece of good news I see in all this is that what happened in East Dallas in terms of redevelopment was almost done by the people of East Dallas themselves without any help from the city. What I'm seeing in Oak Cliff in particular is that same sort of thing, is that they're doing it themselves. They don't need the big property developers to do it. It's smaller companies. It's going to take more time, but the best part is you're going to get better development. You're not going to get really ugly, crappy things like Timber Creek.
Yes. The other consistent theme is that the elected leadership of Southern Dallas has always thrown in with the Citizens Council. They've always assumed that that's the main chance, that those are the rich white guys with the big money, and so we'll support them and they'll support us. It doesn't work. You support them and you get nothing back. You get the back of the hand. And East Dallas and North Oak Cliff learned some time ago that it's harder than that. You have to fight those guys. The Southern Dallas, who loves the Citizens Council more than Von Seal Hill or Dwayne Caraway? They're like their biggest lackeys and fans. Carolyn Davis maybe is more independent on some issues, but I do blame Southern Dallas leadership for allowing itself to fall in with, be exploited by, walk shoulder to shoulder with the Citizens Council North Dallas guys. That formula just doesn't work.
And it's just so weird to watch, because any progress that's been made has been made not by the elected leadership.
Right. Except in North Oak Cliff and East Dallas.
Right.
And I think Grayson has accomplished a lot of stuff for her district that's less visible. It tends to be more infrastructure, less sexy in terms of news value, but
and just very quickly to make the people in Oak Cliff feel a whole lot better. When Prestonwood Town Center closed, and the mall up there closed at LBJ, and now they're stuck with what they're going to do with the remaining in this ridiculous, silly thing, Midtown Dallas, whatever they're going to call it.
Right.
That thing is, I don't want to call it a boondoggle, because we haven't seen enough yet to know it's a boondoggle. But that's the city and the developers getting together to decide what's going to go there and what's good for the people up there. And it's just so 1980s.
Yeah. They tried all this stuff of really strong central planning where the leadership decides what the people need. They worked on this problem for a long time in the Soviet Union, and it didn't work out. They always wound up with a huge oversupply of galoshes and people starving. It's really hard for a few fat guys in ties to figure out what everybody else needs, and that's why the answer in the more successfully redeveloped areas of the city, then I would include North Oak Cliff and East Dallas, has been very organic. It's an endorsement of everything conservatives are supposed to believe in.
Yep.
People determining their own destinies in their own neighborhoods, and yet it flies in the face of the big centralized planning. We have this marriage here, this unholy marriage of the city manager system with the big developers.
And it's always, and you may, Jim, have a better perspective on this, but it's always baffled me how we went from a city where there were literally bodies on the street during the battle over to get zoning in, to the point now where we have to have all-encompassing zoning from the top.
Right. Yeah.
So we went from none to all. I mean, I've never been able to figure that out.
Yeah. And zoning becomes this huge weapon almost to stifle the organic stuff and to kill it off. I don't know that anybody ever thinks it through that far.
I will tell you a story very quickly because I can see we're almost out of time. I know a guy doing, an East Dallas guy who's an architect who's doing some consulting for a deal in a suburb. And it's to bring an East Dallas, North Oak Cliff sort of thing to the suburb. And so the city's working very closely with him. And the city, the suburban government has a leasing guy who wants to see Starbucks and McDonald's in this North Oak Cliff, East Dallas sort of thing. And my friend, the architect, is trying to explain to him, no, it doesn't work that way. Once you put those in, you've got exactly what you had before. Yeah. But the city, that's what the city's just, that's the way they think.
Yeah, it's so much about people's culture and worldview, and you can't change it. And that's why these races where we've got these independent maverick council members are so terribly important, because without them, let's say Abtahi wins in 14. Let's say Hasso, who's pretty weak on this stuff, wins in North Oak Cliff. Man, then we've got nobody except the voice of the Citizens Council. Well, let me see if we have a second left here to talk to Sylvia. Sylvia, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
What's up this morning? We just got seconds left, so.
Okay, just a bit of information on the candidate from District 5. It's a couple or so, the best, because I'm just looking for direction.
And you've
in the Pleasant Grove area.
Right.
Boy, that's the tough one. That's the one where they couldn't even find somebody to run.
Yeah.
Well, Callahan, he's been by, and he's done this and that, and I've received quite a bit of literature. And I've seen some Diaz posters are in the yard, signs. I just want who will. I guess
the question asked, Sylvia, is the person that you vote for, the person that wants your vote, are they going to represent the district, or are they going to represent the people outside the district who want to take that district tax money and use it elsewhere?
Right. We need here in the district.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm sorry that I can't be more help, Sylvia. Those candidates were all pretty opaque to me. I should know more about them, but I don't. And maybe when we come back to this next week, I will have gotten a little bit smarter. And then it'll be too late.
Yeah, because the early voting and everything's coming up.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just thought I would call and inquire.
Sure. Good question.
Okay. All right. Well, have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Jeff, if you had to sum up what we're looking at in this thing, what do you think?
What I would sum up is, and I say this every time there's a city council election, it's our city, it's our tax money, it's our decisions. Why do we abdicate this and let these people who don't even necessarily live here tell us how to spend our money?
Yeah. And I agree, and I think this is kind of I know the turnout's going to be low, and people think there are no big overarching issues. I think there is a huge overarching issue, which is, are we going to maintain at least a dissenting block at the tag end of the council? And I'm worried about it. I do not see Abtahi as a dissenter, ever. I mean, a dissenter from the Citizens Council agenda, nor do I see Hasso that way. So,
well, if he gets elected and he votes to redevelop Garland Road, and we get 30-story apartment buildings, then we'll know, won't we?
Jeff, I don't suppose you can come back to discuss this next weekend.
Anytime you want.
All right,
you
great.
know that.
That'd be great. Well, see you next week. Remember, it's our pledge drive this week. 972-647-1893. There's a show coming on now that's going to rake in the money with your help. So see you next week. Bye.
KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to KNON.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.